I recently played Mother 1. I only had experience before with Mother 3 and a part, not fully, of Earthbound. Recently, I was able to kind of get myself to have a little more tolerance for RPGs, a genre I never really appreciated much before, and I decided to try to push this into playing through the Mother series in chronological order, which I think is something somewhat unique. Again, I'm not completely blind to the other games. I have finished Mother 3 and gotten to perhaps, I don't know, a quarter or halfway through Earthbound, but I really enjoyed what I did of those games. And the only thing that really kept me away was that crunch I don't like very much. I think having completed Mother 1, albeit in a patched form, I'll get on that later, has really allowed me to experience more of these games and was a really interesting experience. I have a lot to say about it, and I didn't really want to go through the effort of writing it all down and editing it and trimming it, so I decided I would ramble into a microphone and cut down what I get from there. Um, Hopefully it ends up half decent. So something that immediately jumps out is the setting. The setting is really weird and distinct and interesting. You are living in just America, modern day sort of suburban America, modern by the 90s, right? But it was a pretty distinct idea and it's still pretty original. Like it's become more of a trope in fiction, but that's because Mother popularized it and other games really took it and ran. There's a reason that all of these quirky RPGs are inspired by Earthbound or in some capacity Mother. As a matter of fact, playing through the game, I noticed a ton of interesting influences. Obviously, there are examples in games like Undertale and Deltarune. I honestly noticed that the Strange Man in the Magic and Underground reminded me a lot of the Forgotten Man and Deltarune, though that's somewhat niche. And I noticed that there were a lot of inspirations from this game implemented into Yume Nikki, a game that I have a lot of fondness for. The Haunted Mansion has a lot of rooms that I think Yume Nikki used for the 8-bit house section, along with the Magic and Underground being the kind of design I think was used for the area where you get the severed head. Not to mention Magic in itself being almost copy and pasted for the Pink Sea. Even the song's pretty similar. This is more vibes based, but I feel like there's also inspiration in the Cave Story soundtrack. It's really intangible and hard to describe, and maybe it's one of those things where you're finding what you're looking for, but something about some of the tracks have a similar sort of harmonization. I don't know. Something about them. The soundtrack to this game is really quite good. Though, it is still an NES game, and many of the classic songs in it have become more reiterated into Earthbound songs with more fantastical arrangements, which is nice. Much more fully fleshed out songs. But either or, back on the actual topic at hand of Mother's interesting, distinct setting, I think part of what makes it so unique is the fact that it is not only just doing a completely unique idea, you are in that modern Americana, you also are in a place where there's more fantastical elements. I mean, there's aliens and magic, or psionic abilities, whatever you call it. There's weird things going on, and a lot of the enemies you find are less than ordinary. Not just the joke ones, but, there's weird and strange and, intentionally abnormal things that say something about what's happening in the world. There's an implication and undercurrent that a lot of the strife you're going through is because of Gaigu and the invasion that's happening. His influence. The Starman Jr. is throwing out the harmful sound in the zoo and has abducted all of the parents in Youngtown. And so suddenly, with an explanation for why you've been fighting zoo animals, it's not that hard to believe that the world isn't normally this dangerous, that what you're in is just straight up the real world, but something's gone wrong. And Thematically, I think what's gone wrong is mankind evils the opposite of love. People being disconnected by strife, conflict, war, and terror. That's sort of an undercurrent I get with the game. There's politics and other things that are just bad and terrible. There's gangs and things, but everyone's still fundamentally a person, and it just being someone and having love in your heart is more important than anything else. The game just has this undercurrent of melancholy throughout it. It's hard to describe because it's not omnipresent, but it feels sort of not lonely, but quiet. You go through all of these areas and there's something strange. The way that you can try to go through the train tunnels, but you'll be swamped by difficult monsters. The way that Youngtown is not openly tragic, but quietly kind of solemn. The way Snowman is so empty. The way that all these places seem just a step or two wrong. But there's things wrong with the world, and not all of them are supernatural. Some things just suck. The mayor is negligent, people suffer, there's gangs. But again, this is the world that we live in, and you can still find joy in it, and not everyone there is bad. Teddy is a very interesting character, but I think to talk about Teddy, I have to talk about Lloyd. And if I'm going to talk about Lloyd, I might as well talk about the cast in general. Nenten, I think, is one of the purest forms of player surrogate, which makes him very interesting as a character. Not to say that he has anything meta or super interesting going on. I mean, you, the player, are literally a distinct character from him. But the whole point with Nenten is that he is meant to represent the white young boy playing the game. And yeah, I think this sort of makes sense. It's about home life and going on an adventure that is genuinely difficult and tough for a kid. And that experience of being a kid is essential to the atmosphere that Earthbound is trying to evoke. A lot of that energy comes from Charles Schultz's Peanuts series, very obvious in some of the art, and I think this gives the game a really distinct feeling, which I wish... Okay, complete side tangent. There's 500 unfinished Mother 1 remakes, and all of them just look like other Mother games. None of them actually try to get this look down, and it kind of bothers me. But that aside, one of the themes of Peanuts is the feeling that these are kids dealing with adult problems, or at least thinking about things in an adult way. There is sort of a straddled line here between childhood and adulthood, and I think Mother tackles the same thing in an interesting way, and it's part of why it's so resonant. Nenten, again, is a player surrogate because unlike, I don't know, Chrono, for example, from Chrono Trigger, you do actually live in the real world. Maybe not exactly as a 12-year-old white boy in suburban America, but you live in the real world. The real world means more to you and is more relatable than some sort of fantastical fantasy land, as all RPGs seem to love to do, at least of the era. And so this makes it more resonant. Again, you're meant to put in your name and your favorite food, the things that mean something to you, and I think that's interesting. Nenten still is a person, but they aren't characterized very much. Though, to be fair, most of the characters in this game are relatively scarce in characterization, and it's more of just something you get a feel for through the few encounters throughout the game. So moving on, let's talk about Pippi for a second. I think Pippi's interesting because she is, well, one, she's very transparently just Pippi Longstocking, and two, she is a temporary party member before you have anyone else. She isn't really like a permanent friend per se, but she definitely feels like someone that you know. I don't know how to explain it, but I think an idea that Mother One likes to go along with is when someone is traveling with you in your party, you become acquainted, you become friends, even if you aren't necessarily saying anything to one another, even if there isn't dialogue or cutscenes. And I think Pippi actually gets this idea across the best because when you see her again later in the game at the swamp, you feel, oh, hey, it's Pippi again. She feels like a friend, like a welcome face. And when she invites you in to sleep and rest, it feels a lot more warranted and earned than a lot of the other people who might give you a free place to sleep. She is someone that you know. She's your friend. You remember her, and you haven't seen each other in a while, but that doesn't mean you're not friends anymore. I think that's cool. Besides that, there's not much to her. It's just kind of interesting, and I think a decent way of tutorializing the game, giving you a party member before it's a super relevant mechanic. Moving on, there's Lloyd. Lloyd is interesting. I think his entire premise is very cool and unique, even if I personally had a little bit of frustration with him mechanically in my playthrough. The idea of a tinkering gadget character whose entire point is using all of those consumable items you're always getting is really cool. And it's one of those things that only makes as much sense as it does within the setting of Mother, which I think is great because, Nenten's he's a reskinned spell sword. Anna is just, a wizard. Teddy's just warrior. But Lloyd, artificer? He's not really an archetype that I, at least, am aware of in other RPGs, and that's cool, independent of your actual thoughts on how he plays. Lloyd, you see, at his school, and he's getting picked on. Nobody likes him. He's been shoved into the trash can. He has weird interests. He wants to build bombs and get bottle rockets, which is, I think kind of a funny contrast. Maybe, I wasn't alive in the 90s, but maybe, this isn't something that seems conflicting to, the audience of the games at the time, but to me, something about this meek kind of easily bullied, fragile kid being really into explosives in these giant round-rimmed glasses is very fun to me. It gives him a unique flavor. There's something I kind of like about how when he joins your party, it's relatively silent. There's no fanfare. There's no, okay, we're friends now. He just comes along with you. You hang out now. And there's something cool about that. And there's a story that's being told that I think relies on the fact that Lloyd is kind of, maybe on purpose, the worst party member. I'm not sure. I'll get into this later, but because of the way I played the game, I think I may have thrown the balance out a little bit, and so my thoughts on the gameplay may be skewed. But either or, narratively, Lloyd is considered a weakling, and this is important to him. We'll come back to it later, but he is not very strong necessarily, but he has a bit of wit to him. Anna is next, and honestly, I am of two minds about her. I feel like she doesn't really get very much characterization, and most of it is devoted to her being a token love interest, which is kind of uninteresting, especially since Nenten is also a silent character without much to say. There's one line of dialogue granted to him in the entire game, and what is characterized about him is mostly things that you learn from the things around him, right? He isn't a pure blank slate, but he still isn't that much of a character, especially not as much as someone like Lloyd. And so when Anna is a character mostly characterized by her relationship with Nenten, it, to me at least, felt kind of flat. But, what they did was interesting enough. I like that they try to show this sort of cutesy kid's first crush vibe going on. And the idea that Anna already has visions of the people she's going to meet and that she is anticipating meeting Nenten makes the relationship somewhat interesting, even if I think she as a character is probably less interesting than the other two. I wish there was a little more screen time given to her in particular. Now, Teddy is a very interesting character because he's like kind of a weirdo in comparison to the rest of the party, that is. Everyone here is like a bunch of children, and then you got this like 20-something gang member who gains a begrudging, well, not really begrudging, a complete respect for Nenten because they can both kick each other's ass. It's just kind of strange. He doesn't fit, and I think that's intentional. The cast about Mother is about being friends and about having a lot of heart. And I would definitely say that Teddy becomes a friend at the end, but he is not characterized as one at the start. He's just kind of coming in and saying, okay, I have respect for you, let's go at it. Which kind of makes sense for a leader of a gang. Teddy, though, is interesting because of the way that he interacts with Lloyd and the way they both kind of interact with the themes going on here. Teddy ends up getting badly injured and having to spend a while to try and recover, and Lloyd is the one to save them from even potentially dying in the first place. Teddy even admits that pure strength isn't going to cut it, and this is something that Lloyd can help with. And I think that this is something that's interesting and important. There's all these themes about ills and bad things that people can fall into, and I think Teddy is meant to represent a lot of that, but he's not, like, irredeemable. He's still a good person at heart. He just happens to have had a rough time of things. He learns that a pure might makes right mentality isn't correct, and I think that this is, honestly, part of an intentional parallel to Gaigu. Gaigu has the belief that Earthlings are weak, humans are inferior, and can be trod upon, but everyone else in the party, including Lloyd, are able to appeal to his emotion, appeal to something beyond pure strength, and that is what allows them to win. And maybe this is going out on a limb, but I feel like a gang member, right, is probably the one type of person that wouldn't go up and completely earnestly sing in front of some sort of eldritch monster. But you know what? Lloyd is. And by the end of the game, once we get to the epilogue, we find that Teddy is actually recovered and performing. And you know what he's doing? He's singing. He's changed a little. And I don't know. There's nothing really to imply that he wouldn't sing before, but this is just something I thought about and I think is kind of cute. It's my own little headcanon. Either or, characters in Mother don't necessarily have all that much to say, but you still get a strong sense for who they are, and there's some fun things going on. Mother seems like a game that strangely doesn't really give you too much to go off of, but really lets you go wild with your own imagination, and maybe that's a hallmark of bad writing or something, but to me, I kind of appeals to my like for death of the author-ish kind of theory crafting. A lot of what's there is more implied, and you have to think about a little, rather than being, like, more overt. It's interesting. Now, the story itself, I think, is kind of weak. It doesn't feel overarching or like it is this big part of the narrative of your day-to-day going about. It just feels like something that occasionally crops up. You kind of almost haphazardly remember, oh, yeah, the evil alien. Or, well, you at least eventually learn that there's an evil alien. There's something nefarious running amok and making a mess of things. And it doesn't feel like the game is like constantly pulling you with it or not. The game's very, very open. Maybe this is a issue that happens with taking one of these things. You're going to have to miss the other. If you want an open-ended game, you can't have as strong of a to B narrative about a overarching story, but I still wish there was a little bit more effort made to it. The game feels kind of scattered at points, especially with the melodies themselves being very literally scattered. But I do think that they work effectively. The story and narrative of the melodies and the way that they integrate into the final boss event, Gaigu, is actually pretty cool. It's a very unique and interesting way to do a final fight because it is pretty much the antithesis of that epic JRPG final battle. You don't get that. As a matter of fact, Mother 1 seems almost allergic to big battles. Most of the encounters you have are just the world weathering you down a little bit. By the time you are able to fight the dragon in Magicant's Underground, you can probably kill the thing in 1 or 2 hits, and Gaigu isn't a boss about defeating it through attacking. It's about a narrative. It's about the story. And any difficulty or like mechanical challenge that comes from it is purely in keeping your team alive. Again, this is part of Mother 1's very distinct atmosphere and idea for what it wants to do. I think it's in some ways intentional that most of the difficulty in the game just comes from getting from place to place, that everything feels kind of dangerous and big epic encounters don't really happen. Everything's just a messy series of fights, and the biggest challenge that the game really throws at you is long stretches with lots of enemies and few save points, like Mounty Toy, or even exploring the Duncan factory, which really threw a lot out of me personally, considering that Lloyd was still pretty fragile at that point. I think this, along with other things, is again part of that idea of that feeling of childhood and the way that the world feels very dangerous and against you. There's no big boss masterminding everything, well, except for the one that literally is. But, like, mechanically, there really isn't some big guy you're building towards. There's just a bunch of things that are out to get you. The world is hostile towards you, but you still need to weather through it. Magicant, I think, is one of the more interesting examples because it feels like it's meant to be the idea of, like, a purely childlike place. Though I know that it's probably meant to represent just pure love in its most undiluted form, I think that it also, something about it feels like it leans into that sense of naivety. The guy with the bag of magic herbs that you need to give up your ATM card to get, in the way that you need to trust this man, feels like the sort of thing that a child would do without much question, but as an adult, you immediately think that there's going to be an issue with that. I think that the way Magicant even falls away at the end of the game, the way that you have no way to return, the Onyx Hook becoming defunct and null, is meant to in some way evoke that classical coming-of-age moment in a story where character realizes that they can't go back to their childhood anymore. Magicant is gone. That heritage is gone, and while it's still in memory, there aren't literal robots or magic places there to help Nenten and his friends anymore. They're on their own. And it's in a very high-stakes situation, but again, I think it's fundamentally a story about childhood, adulthood, and growing up. As much as I thought that this was going to end up being like 45 minutes, I somehow feel like I don't have much more to say about the actual story and all that of the game itself. Guess I must have consolidated it by the time that this is coming out because, well, I just finished the game recently and it's been rolling in my mind for a while. But I guess, since we're on the topic, let's talk about the part that is most pertinent to the actual playing of a game, the gameplay itself. This is the part that I think often falls on the wayside when a game kind of retreats into your memory. Even if you like a game because of what it does mechanically, what you're going to remember isn't really the actual mechanics of a boss, but rather how they made you feel and the way that you felt interacting with them. Now, my gameplay experience with Mother 1 was a little scuffed because what I ended up doing is, see, I had two things that I wanted simultaneously. As I mentioned before, I played Mother 3 in its entirety a long while ago. I don't remember the exacts, but it was one of the only RPGs I finished and enjoyed. And I remember that the translation was incredible, the fan translation, and that the common way that people played Mother 1 Plus 2 on the Game Boy Advance apparently used a translation by the same guy that did the Mother 3 translation. And so I thought to myself, oh, well, this fan translation is going to be leagues better, right? And so I wanted the 25th anniversary patch because it included that translation. But I didn't want the game to have all these other alterations because the 25th anniversary patch also changes a bunch of sprites and things and has like balance changes and things. Now, I knew I was getting into an NES RPG and I didn't want the full brunt of that, but I also didn't want to like completely trivialize the game, which I heard that at least the Mother 1 Plus 2 Easy Ring did. But apparently this 25th anniversary edition patch changed some of the issues people had with the game in order to hopefully make it more accommodating. And considering all of this, it sounded like a good deal with a couple caveats. And so I hunted down some additional patches. I don't remember their names exactly, but something like a Faithful Edition and something else to try to restore the original graphics and keep the game as authentic as I could while retaining the NES soundtrack, the great translation, and hopefully a slightly easier version of the game. In retrospect, I kind of regret this because I think the translation was good, though I don't have as great of a comparison since I haven't played the full game in the original translation, though I have seen tidbits of it through other gameplay. I do think that the game's balance was thrown out of whack pretty heavily by this. Mostly the fact that the amount of experience and money I was getting, I think, was lower than it would have been otherwise, and the fact that party members were already leveled up. See, these are two additions that are added by the 25th anniversary edition, and what it ends up doing is the following. The encounter rate has been quote unquote readjusted, which I believe is just a way to say that the encounter rate is less common and enemies yield more experience. Now, this doesn't sound too bad because a lot of people complain of the game's encounter rate, but to my understanding, the money that you gain is tied to the amount of enemies and the difficulty that you defeat. Each enemy essentially drops gold, but you just don't get it until you call your dad later. And with this, what ended up happening is I felt like I didn't have as much money as I was meant to have, and that some areas of the game weren't as difficult as they were meant to be. Not that I wanted the game to be grueling, but I think that because of that, that's a big reason why I didn't actually like Lloyd as much gameplay-wise. I didn't have the money to buy him all of the items he was meant to be using. And encounters didn't feel as difficult enough as to warrant using those items as much, which often just left him being dead weight. Similarly, Teddy, for some strange reason, because of the way the patch handles leveling, was completely over-leveled. He was the same level as everyone else, yeah, but the EXP to next level indicator showed that he literally had an extra digit, and he was one-hitting most enemies I found, doing about 100 damage per hit when everyone else was doing like 20. This was kind of ridiculous and threw off the balance pretty heavily. My playthrough, I think, was generally very scuffed. I was kind of confused and I needed a walkthrough to get around, which was definitely one of the weaker parts of the game. Excluding the fact that I played a botched version and it colored the way that I saw Lloyd, which, if you can stomach a crunchier game like this, I would honestly suggest that you just get the retranslation alone or look around on romhacking.net, see if you can find something suited to your taste, but just keep an eye out. Keep these things in mind if you ever decide to play the game yourself or replay it. I'm going to assume that you haven't played it because no one has played Mother 1. I'm actually the coolest hipster around. But anyways, excluding all of those sort of gameplay issues I stumbled onto, I ended up having that classic secret hunter syndrome where you don't know what the main route is. And that completely threw off my trek up Mountatoy to the point where I had to go back down and then take the boat and then come back. And so I ended up destroying Eve in the complete wrong direction, so she never helped me much anyways, and it was all a mess. This game is awkward as hell, and honestly, I would say that one of the biggest issues with playing it in the modern day is the fact that it's really hard to kind of approach the game in the way that you should, because I haven't used these. I didn't use it for Mother 3, and I didn't use it for what little I played of Mother 2, but I know that those games have guides, like player's handbooks that come with them, or at least exist, and I hope to use them, next as I play through these games, because I'm doing a little run through the series right now. That's why I played with Mother 1. I wanted to start with the beginning. And those are like essential parts of the game from what everyone says, right? And this was part of Mother 1 as well. It came with a little book that gave all kinds of information about the game world and things like that. And having that kind of player's guide built into the package that you're getting, kind of like Earthbound, I think would have made this game infinitely more palatable. Thankfully, there are translations online of the original Japanese one, but they're all scuffed and like text only from what I can find, and it's just a mess. You aren't going to find what you're actually looking for easily, and you're going to end up having to use a walkthrough, and it's very scuffed. I don't know how I would really suggest to play this game or experience it, other than to say that if you have someone who has played it or is willing to look through the wiki for you and nudge you in the right way, it's probably best like that. It's a game I think has a lot of magic ruined if you look into what exactly to do too deeply. I say as someone who kind of did that at points, but you also need some guidance because some of these things are absurd. Anyone who genuinely tells you that you can just tell that cactus by keeping an eye out is insane. It's moving past the screen at 1,000,000 miles per hour. And you got to remember, you're playing this on a CRT. You are insane. You are absolutely a lunatic. What the fuck am I saying? Other one was really cute, charming game, and I really enjoyed it a lot more than I expected myself to. I found myself feeling like I was pulling teeth through a lot of the actual playing through it, but right now I'm weirdly struck by a want to replay it. Um, Maybe it's better in memory than it is in actually playing it through, but I still think that the memory of playing it is worth the experience. This game resonated with me a lot more than I really think it had any right to, and I'm saying this as someone whose only other RPG experience is Mother 3, a little Pokemon, and Chrono Trigger. Does Undertale count? Like, I don't know how I got through it, and it was messy, but if I could get through it and I could enjoy it, then you probably can too. And if you're willing to get through the whole thing, there's a lot waiting. I don't know why I'm shilling this game to you in a video about it. No one who isn't already interested in Mother 1 isn't going to watch this, but either or, I just am very happy I played this game. And I'm very glad that what it did and what a lot of what was unique and interesting about it seems to have been transferred into the later games in the series. But I still think, from what I've experienced, Mother 1 has a distinct, unique, fascinating vibe that I haven't really felt in any other game. And it makes a lot of sense to me why that's the particular thing that a lot of these little influences come from. I think, honestly, that if you haven't played Mother 1 but consider yourself a fan of the Mother series, that you are sincerely missing out on something unique, something a little bit different, something special. The start of a series where you can really see the roots take hold. Anyways, that was a long tangent. I'm gonna go play Earthbound now. But not until we finish this bonus round. This video took me like a week to make, and that might not sound like much, but this is a lot for me, and I've never made any project like this before. During the making of, I ended up having a couple things that I thought I'd like to change, and I did not want to go through the effort of changing them, so instead of doing that, I'm going to tack on to this as a little addendum at the end, make it a Deltarune reference, and we're good. First of all, the name Mother means a lot of things. It refers to motherhood, the mothership, and Mother Earth, even as titled in the opening theme itself. Now, this represents obviously the love of mothers and the love of the planet itself, but interestingly, all of these ideas are encompassed by Maria herself. She is on the mothership, she is a mother herself to Gaigu, and she implants ideas of the planet itself into him, to the point that we defeat him by singing, by appealing to his humanity. Magikin is also kind of doting in a way that a mother would be, appealing to a child, and the Flying Men encompass the concept of motherhood as sacrifice, doing everything that you can because of your love for others, also represented in the phenomenal Mother 1 vocal album song Flying Man. Now, my tragic penchant for woke misogyny ended up making me flub the Anna section a bit. I still think that she has a little bit less to chew on than Teddy and Lloyd, but by a much smaller amount than I gave her credit for. I completely missed out on her dynamic with her mother. Yes, we're tying this in. Her mom is someone who's lost, and she is waiting to be able to save her, but she's also relying on these people that she's waiting for psychically to be able to help her even get to that place in the first place. She needs these people in order to do it, and she needs Nintendo, the natural board leader, to give her an idea of what to do in order to get this to happen. She ends up getting caught into something way bigger than herself or any one of them, but it's all for the sake of rescuing her mom. She cares about her, and she loves not only her friends but her family, so she's going to do what she can. Getting dragged into this situation is also part of the reason I think that she falls in love with Ninten, which ends up giving that arc a little bit more meat. Again, like the party thing that I mentioned with Pippi earlier. But at the very end of the game, it seems that she is going to have a harder time keeping in contact with Ninten and even Lloyd, which is a little bit melancholy. She achieved her goal, but something a little sad has happened. Life moves on, and we meet and lose people over time, but we still keep going. Okay, that's it. Shut it all down. Mike, kill me.